Okay, welcome to another little video lesson. This time I'd just like to focus on Elizabeth Browning's Sonnet 29, I Think of Thee, of the Love and Relationships Anthology for AQA. Okay, um, these all follow the similar format, little subheadings about the title, themes, form and structure, language and imagery. I'll go through the poem and analyse the poem, identifying poetic techniques and devices, and yeah, we'll see how we get on. Okay, so briefly then about the poem is a female speaker expressing how she longs to be reunited with her lover. Brief summary. The title. Now, don't ignore the title of any of the poems on any of the anthologies because they're important. This poem, for example, the title is repeated, I think 7 times, maybe even 8. Repeated 7 times throughout the poem. I think of thee, emphasising the obsession maybe she has to be reunited with her lover. Okay, the title is a direct address from the woman to her lover. And the themes you can connect it with longing, desire, passion, and nature, as is common for the romantics and the love poetry and their love poetry. Okay, context. Elizabeth Barrett Browning was a very successful poet in her own lifetime. She married Robert Browning in secret, after which her father disinherited her. The reason they married in secret was because they feared what her father would say, and they were right to. He disinherited her. This poem is about her future husband, so they hadn't married yet, and is one of many she wrote on a similar theme. Natural imagery again plays a prominent role. And if you just state that natural imagery plays a prominent role, and then you can talk about the tree and the vines and so on, that's brilliant for your ticking the context box in the exam. Okay, form and structure. Well, a couple of interesting points to make about this. Sonnet form. It's loosely based on the Petrarchan sonnet form, with the opening 8 lines, an octave, raising a problem, which is the physical distance between them, and then the remaining 6 lines usually provide the solution. Then they're known as the sestet. Not quite accurate for this poem, because the turning point, which is usually around about the start of line 9, and is also known as a volta, it arrives earlier in line 7. And what's the impact or the effect of that? Well, this could reflect the narrator's impatience to be reunited with her lover. Always talk about, it's one thing to identify a technique, a volta in this case. You need to then explain what the effect is, what the impact is of that technique. Okay, and that's simply by saying could reflect the narrator's impatience. And if you say it could reflect, that's called tentative analysis, which is fundamental to the higher grade. So you're not saying definitively anything is something, you're offering a bit of analysis. It could potentially mean this, it might mean something else, but it could mean this. The structure, okay, the transition from the problem to the solution reflects the transition from her only thinking about her lover to actually being with her lover, okay? Just a little note down the bottom there about Petrarch, and Petrarch himself was a 14th century Italian poet who wrote sonnets more about the emotional desire for someone than the physical act of being with them. And you can see the relevance of that for this poem. Okay, language and imagery. The poem contains an extended metaphor. There's your technique. The lover as a tree, the speaker as vines, and her thoughts. Sorry, the speaker as that as shouldn't be there. Delete it. The speaker and her thoughts as wild vines that cover him. This could reflect how her lover is constantly growing for him and how she wants him to be big and strong. It could also mean that it's suffocating him, it's controlling him perhaps, but that's another alternative interpretation. The language is almost uncontrollable, bursting with excitement, full of repetition of thee, exclamation marks, imperatives, that's command words, and plosive sounds like burst, shattered everywhere. The use of caesura and enjambment feeds into this overall sense of uncontrollable desire and longing. Now, a lot of techniques there. Caesura, that's any pause in the middle of a line. So it could be a comma, it could be a hyphen, could be a full stop, could be an exclamation mark. Enjambment or enjambment, depends on how you pronounce it. Again, you don't have to pronounce it, you just have to be able to know what it is and write it in the exam. Is where one line feeds onto the other. There's no end stop. There's no punctuation at the end of a line. It can go from a stanza to a stanza as well. Okay, and that could reflect a lack of control over thoughts, perhaps, in this case. Okay. Now, a bit of analysis of the actual poem itself. The opening octave, I've divided it into the octave, which is the opening 8 lines, and I've only split it like this so I can put little annotations around, as you'll see in a minute. And on the next screen, we'll look at the sestet, the solution, if you like. Okay, so I think of thee. Well, we've got a repetition of the title there straight away. We've got an exclamation mark and a hyphen, a dash. Well, there's a caesura, but it's a double caesura. It's like really emphasizing that I think of you. Okay, my thoughts do twine and bud about thee. There's enjambment in there, as wild vines. So you've got your simile, you've got your metaphor about a tree. Put out broad leaves, and soon there's naught to see, except the straggling green which hides the wood. So, what have I written along here? Okay, first thing, poem's written in the first person. So that makes it more personal. Repetition of title. Count how many times thee is used, which implies an obsession. Natural imagery, good context reference, reflecting how her thoughts focus on him and constantly grow. A metaphor with the narrator as the wild vines and her lover as the tree. And this is an extended metaphor. It comes up more than once. She touches on this again. Except the straggling green suggests the vines and her thoughts are inferior to the man himself. Okay, yet, O my palm tree, be it understood, I will not have my thoughts instead of thee who art better. So this is the problem. I won't just think about you. I want you here. I want to be with you, is what she's saying. She's fed up just having to think of him. Rather, she wants him with her now. This is the problem, following the Petrarchan tradition, the problem that's raised in the opening octave. Who art dearer, better. Caesura to indicate the turning point or volta. Remember, volta, technique's turning point. This occurs in line 7 as opposed to the traditional line 9. Perhaps, tentative language, to indicate the narrator's impatience. She wants to be with him. And just a word about the rhyme scheme. Traditional Petrarchan sonnet form, ABBA, ABBA rhyme scheme. In case you don't know the rhyme scheme, the last word of the first line, you give the letter A. The last word of the second line, if it rhymes with the first line, you give it A. If it doesn't, you give it B. You go to the last word on the third line. That rhymes with tree, which was a B. So you've now got A, B, B, and wood and bud. Now, this is interesting. Wood and bud. They kind of rhyme. So we call that a half rhyme. That's a technique, half rhyme. What effect does this half rhyme have? Well, what's the problem she's got in this opening octave? Is that they're not together. Physically, they're not together. And that half rhyme might reflect that they're not quite together. They're not quite united. So it's not a full rhyme. Okay, you've got your technique. You've got your effect. Okay, moving on to the sestet. And I realise I'm talking quite quickly, but you can break this video down. You can pause it, take notes, as and when you wish. Okay, so the sestet. This is where the problem is usually resolved. And this problem being resolved, it just means that they're together. Okay, so rustle thy boughs and set thy trunk all bare, and let these bands of greenery which ensphere thee drop heavily down, burst, shattered everywhere. Because in this deep joy to see and hear thee and breathe within thy shadow a new air, I do not think of thee, I am too near thee. So they're together, and the language becomes quite physical, quite graphic, full of excitement. Quite sexual as well, erotic perhaps. So continuing the extended metaphor of her as the vines and her lover as the tree. Possible erotic imagery here, so thy trunk all bare, more physical, reflecting what she wants. Use of caesura. So you got the dash here and the comma, followed by 3 separate words to emphasize her excitement. Burst, comma, shattered, comma, everywhere, exclamation mark, which adds to the effect. Continued repetition of thee. Remember, I think 7 or 8 times throughout a 14-line poem is quite a lot, emphasising her obsession. Reversal of title here. I do not think of thee. Remember the titles, I think of thee. Sonnets, I think of thee. I do not think of thee. Reversal of title and opening line highlights the change in the narrator's position. She no longer has to think about him when she's with him. He's far better than she could have imagined. It's an interpretation of that. Okay, so quite a lot there. Summary of main poetic devices used: Petrarchan sonnet, octave, sestet, volta, which is turning point, natural imagery, extended metaphor, repetition, punctuation, enjambment, caesura, imperatives, plosive sounds. Loads there. And you'll become very familiar with these as you go through the 15 poems on the anthology. And it means that probably the best section in the exam will be your unseen section, because you'll have all these poetic devices to look out for in the unseen poem, and you'll nail it. That's a technical term. Useful vocabulary to use when analysing this poem. Okay, use the word problem, resolution, longing, desire, distance, impatience, intensity, obsession, and any others you can come up with. Which other poems can you link it to? Well, I've got the... Right, okay, I've helpfully put my ugly mug over some of this, but we can possibly work it out. Links to other poems. Relationships as fulfilling in Sing Song and Climbing My Grandfather. Actually, there's not much missing there at all. Natural imagery and distance in Winter Swans and Love's Philosophy. And I will be looking at, there'll be little video lessons on each of those poems at some point. If they're not already there, check them out. Okay, guys, that's me over and out for this one. Catch you again soon. Bye.